All right, let's jump right into this. Today, we're unpacking Backstabbed in a Backwater Dungeon. This is basically the ultimate dark fantasy tale of betrayal, vengeance, and honestly, some of the most absurd power scaling you're ever going to see in modern storytelling. We're breaking down the exact characters and mechanics that make this whole universe tick. If you're into stories where the underdog doesn't just win, but absolutely annihilates the competition in a meticulously planned revenge plot, you're going to love this. To really get this story, we have to start with one central question. What happens when you betray the one person capable of destroying the world? Picture this. We're talking about a 12-year-old human boy tossed into the deepest, deadliest dungeon imaginable, a nightmare place called the Abyss. He's literally just left down there to be eaten by monsters. But he doesn't die. Instead, he returns years later as a literal, unstoppable god, commanding an army of terrifyingly loyal followers. So how on earth does a kid go from absolute zero to absolute destruction?
Well, let's dive into part one, a tale of betrayal and the descent into the abyss. We kick things off with our protagonist, a boy named Light, and the adventuring party that recruited him, grandly called the Gathering of Races. It was a multiracial group, and Light was lured in by their big promises of creating a world without discrimination, basically serving as their token human member.
But, as you'll see, the Gathering of Races perfectly embodies that classic trope, the bitch in sheep's clothing. Every single one of these party members completely faked their compassion. See, in their world, there's a system of fantastic racism, where humans are severely oppressed. The Gathering only treated Light kindly because they thought he was a legendary master candidate. The exact second they unilaterally decided he didn't actually have the powers of a master, they dropped the act entirely. They deemed him useless, mocked him for being naive enough to think they actually cared, and then violently turned on him, deciding to murder him just to be safe. But their sadistic desire to torture him instead of just making it quick backfired in a spectacular way. During the attack, Light accidentally triggered a teleportation trap that sent him to the absolute bottom of the abyss. And just look at this crazy contrast on the screen. Before the betrayal, Light was just a level 15, super weak farmer's son. But after surviving the abyss, he comes out as a level 9999 Magic Knight. He is a literal person of mass destruction, armed with a Genesis-class magic staff called Gungnir that can literally destroy deities. Moving on to Section 2, Power of the Gotcha, and the journey from trash to god tier. You're probably wondering, how exactly did a level 15 human survive a dungeon that's basically just instant death? Well, it all comes down to the mechanics of this world and a very unique gift he had.
See, Light possessed a skill called Unlimited Gotcha. Up on the surface world, everyone thought this gift was absolute trash because it only ever spawned worthless items. We're talking rusty forks or moldy bread. But here is the secret the Gathering of Races had no clue about. The gotcha is heavily influenced by the amount of mana in the air around you. At the absolute bottom of the Abyss dungeon, the mana density is off the charts. So suddenly, Light's completely useless ability to summon moldy bread transformed into this world-breaking power. He was suddenly pulling legendary weapons, insanely powerful monsters, and ridiculously overpowered allies. So, the crucial takeaway here is the number 9999. Let that sink in. In the context of this world, this isn't just a high rank, it is the absolute, intractable maximum ceiling of power. By using his gotcha down in the abyss, Light doesn't just hit level 9999 himself, he starts spawning an entire faction of allies who are also completely maxed out at level 9999. He literally establishes a brand new hierarchy in the world. Welcome to Part 3, the Level 999 Army, overpowered and fanatically loyal. This is where we meet the terrifying, trope-heavy faction of allies Light summons to enact his vengeance. Because Light doesn't just build a small party, he essentially creates an entire nation of insanely loyal, overpowered followers who view him as a flawless, absolute deity. If we trace his timeline, you can see his path to total war. On day 1, he's desperate, about to be eaten by a monster, so he uses his unlimited gotcha and pulls a level 999 ally named May, who instantly saves his life. Flash forward 2.5 years of non-stop training and summoning, and he finally exits the abyss. But tragedy strikes. He finds out he's the sole survivor of his doomed hometown, which was completely wiped out by the exact same people who ordered his death. That shatters any lingering innocence he had left. By year 3, a highly cynical, cold Light returns to the abyss to systematically build a massive army designed for one single purpose: perfectly executed revenge against his former companions and the world that backed them.
What's genuinely fascinating is the specialized roles of his highest-ranking summons. They're basically treated as this dysfunctional but fiercely loyal family of sisters. First, you've got May, the ninja maid, whose inspect ability makes her a living, breathing lie detector. Then there's Ayuki, a cat-themed monster tamer who acts as his ultimate scout. We also have Ellie, the forbidden mage and mad scientist who happily extracts intel by utterly shattering the minds of her targets. And finally, Nizuna, who is a ditzy but devastating vampire knight. Her sword is so absurdly powerful, it literally warps reality just to clone her. And just to give you an idea of the sheer absurd scale of the army Light has amassed, his secondary forces are still totally game-breaking. His floor guardians sit at level 7,777. This squad includes Mera, a human-looking chimera whose very cells are individual eldritch monsters. Ice Heat, a kung fu wizard wielding volcanic fire and freezing ice. Suzu, a shy girl with a sentient, rapid-fire magic musket. And Jack, who is basically an armored juggernaut. Honestly, against normal adventurers, these guardians alone are an unstoppable apocalyptic threat. But who is on the receiving end of all this power? Let's move to Section 4, the gathering of races, and the architecture of arrogance. We really need to shift our focus to the villains of the story, those irredeemable former allies. These characters are totally the architects of their own demise, completely blinded by their arrogance and a system of fantastic racism that convinced them humans were totally worthless. And this brilliantly illustrates how the author constructed these bad guys. Each betrayer perfectly embodies a deadly sin. Garu the Beast Man represents gluttony, driven by raw ambition and a literal addiction to hearing humans scream. Sasha the Elf is envy, completely desperate to marry into high nobility. Shanyan the Dark Elf represents lust, specifically a really twisted, sadistic lust for torturing souls. And Nano the Dwarf is greed, totally obsessed with fame. By assigning them these super recognizable, deadly sins, the story gives us villains who are just utterly irredeemable. And let's be honest, that makes the impending revenge so deeply satisfying to watch unfold. Let's look closely at Guru for a second. He is the ultimate dirty, coward bully. He absolutely loves flaunting his power over anyone weaker than him. But when Light finally confronts him and effortlessly obliterates Guru's ultimate summoned beast with just a casual attack, Guru's reaction is priceless. The shock is so intense that his fur literally turns white and starts falling out from pure terror. The exact moment he realizes Light's true strength, he drops straight to his knees, begs for mercy, and even tries to sell out his own tribesmen just to save his own skin. Then you have Nanano the dwarf, who is basically a psychopathic man-child. Now, dwarves are usually portrayed as super honorable in fantasy, right? But Nanano is the token evil teammate for his race. He is completely unfettered, viewing innocent humans and even his fellow dwarves as nothing more than human resources to be slaughtered so he can feed their souls to a forbidden, cursed sword. He just wants to be famous, completely and totally ignoring the morality of what he's doing. Which brings us to Section 5, the art of vengeance and breaking the haughty. This right here is the core thematic structure of the whole story, perfectly executed payback. Light doesn't just want to kill these people, he wants to break them. The trope here is literally break the haughty. He wants them to feel the exact same crushing despair and total powerlessness that they forced upon him 3 years ago. Here is Light's incredibly methodical, step-by-step operation for vengeance. Step 1. He actually holds back in a fight, deliberately giving them a false sense of hope. Step 2, once they really think they're winning, he pulls the rug out, drops his level 9999 stats on them, and completely shatters their pride with just overwhelming power. Step 3, he doesn't kill them immediately. Because he needs to know exactly who ordered his death, he captures them and hands well over to Ellie, who forcefully extracts their intel through agonizing mental magic. And finally, Step 4. They are handed over to someone like Mera the Chimera, who subjects them to infinite punishment, literally tearing them apart and healing them over and over again. It is brutal. Ultimately, this whole explainer hinges on one massive, delicious irony, this self-fulfilling prophecy. See, the gathering of races and their superiors ordered Light to be killed because they were absolutely terrified of a human master rising up and dominating their races. But by betraying him, destroying his home, and throwing him into the mana-dense abyss, they inadvertently handed him the exact tools, power, and motivation he needed to become the very monster they were so afraid of. By trying to prevent the end of their world, they absolutely guaranteed it. Which leaves us with this incredible, provocative quote from Light himself, right after Garwu accuses him of being a god of destruction. Light just smiles and says, "Now, should I be a benevolent god or an evil one? Guess I'll have to ask the world about it." He literally has the power to erase continents. Yet he waits, methodically tearing down his enemies while deciding the ultimate fate of this entire dark fantasy world. It's a pretty chilling reminder that sometimes the monsters we create in the dark come back to ask us exactly how we'd like to end. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.